Friends, welcome to this podcast. In this episode, we're going to touch on a super important topic involving due process rights of immigrants, whether they're legal here in the United States or illegal. Whatever situation you're in, as a matter of fact, we're going to touch on it because this topic of the erosion of due process rights will impact pretty much everyone here in the United States. So stick around, listen to this podcast all the way until the end. I'm super excited to introduce my special guest today, attorney Danielle Bess out of Georgia. Danielle, welcome to McBean Immigration TV. How are you today?
I am great today. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Excellent. So am I. Can you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what area of the law you practice.
Sure. So I'm an attorney in Georgia, in Metro Atlanta. My law firm focuses on representing people who have been injured through the no fault of their own. We represent people in everything from nursing home abuse cases, that is one of our main focuses, but also things like car accidents and slip and falls. And I have a very special interest in constitutional law, and what is happening right now in our country is I'm very interested in and very concerned about.
And as a matter of fact, that's how I found you. And this is our first time meeting, which is even more exciting. But I found Danielle on TikTok. Danielle has been speaking about due process, constitutional issues, which are near and dear to my heart as well. Constitutional law was one of my favorite subjects during law school. And so Danielle's videos on TikTok, which you should watch, by the way, at the end of the broadcast, I'll share with you how to find Danielle and how to follow her on all social media platforms, of course. What caught my attention is Danielle started talking about immigrants. What made you start talking about immigrants, Danielle?
So, as we've seen what's happening in the country and how there's this focus on immigrants, to me, it was very alarming because there are some people who think that's a them problem. And in reality, it's really an us problem. Constitutional right, what's happening to immigrants, it's really the foundation of our country. Allow immigrants' rights to be abused, then it's just a slippery slope until it happens to people who are not immigrants. So that was what I'm most concerned about. I am just hoping that people will realize that this is not just an immigrant problem. It's something that we all need to be concerned about.
And that's the foresight, right? The ability to see ahead. Yes, we see now that this administration is laser focused on immigrants. And they say, okay, well, we're laser focused on illegal immigration, when in fact, we see the erosion of legal immigration happening as well. And I see it more so than perhaps you, because I'm in the field, obviously, of immigration. And we see the way that this administration has been rolling back on the lawful status of millions of people who are in the United States right now with illegal status. And all of those efforts, of course, are being challenged in court. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But let's just lay some foundation around this issue of due process. How do you describe due process to the average person who may not know legalities or the jargon that perhaps we know?
So when we say due process, what I think about is fairness. So due process says that before the government can do anything to you, before they can take away your freedom, before they can take away your property, that they have to give you a fair process. So that fair process means they have to tell you why they're doing this to you. They have to give you an opportunity to present your evidence, and they have to do it in a fair way. They have to do it in front of a neutral, a judge who is going to be fair and neutral and hear the evidence. So that for me is what due process is.
Exactly. And the same applies in the immigration context. We'll get into the Fifth Amendment right now. As a matter of fact, under the Fifth Amendment, friends, immigrants who are here legally or illegally, they are considered a person. And really, that's what is at issue now, whether illegal immigrants are considered a person under our constitutional laws. And as a person, they're entitled to protection. And the due process that you just laid out with respect to a hearing, being able to understand what the charges are against them, whether it's a civil charge or a criminal charge, being able to present their case to a judge, a fair judge, so to speak, and being able to have a lawyer to represent them. And in the immigration context, it's a little different. Immigrants are not within the immigration context. Immigrants have a right to obtain a lawyer, but it's a private attorney that they could hire. They're not entitled to a government taxpayer funded attorney. So, Danielle, ChatGPT helped me to prepare for today's podcast with you. And ChatGPT did a great job laying out all of the Supreme Court cases that reinforced the fact that immigrants, legal or illegal, are persons, number one, and they're entitled to due process under both the
Yes.
Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment.
And in our Constitution, there's nothing that says immigrants must be treated differently. The
Right.
Constitution talks about persons.
Persons.
And there's no distinction between people who are here legally, undocumented people. It says nothing. It makes no distinction. And we shouldn't be making those distinctions.
I remember there was a time when we were making those distinctions, right? That's why the 14th Amendment came into effect, right? That says no state shall deprive a person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The federal government, of course, under the Fifth Amendment, and then through the states, it's the 14th Amendment. And so we're going back in time. I heard Steve Bannon just recently, not just him, but others in the administration, Stephen Miller, also made references to the fact that illegal immigrants are not entitled to any constitutional protection at all. The argument is so familiar because we've read it in our history books, right? With respect to African Americans, slavery. And so it's just all so familiar.
Right. And it's really sad that we're going backwards. The 14th Amendment protected African Americans. And what we're seeing today, it has happened before in American history in the
Mhm.
1940s with Japanese Americans who were interned. It started with an executive order from the president.
Mhm.
And from that executive order, the courts, unfortunately at that time, said they were not entitled to due process. So that part of our history should be a warning for us because we've seen this happen before. And at that time, there were American citizens who were interned. They had no hearings, they had no individualized assessments, none of those things. So for people who say, oh, we're exaggerating, we're being alarmist, no, this is very real. We all need to be aware and concerned about what is happening.
Absolutely. There's this notion too that's popping up in some of the immigration policy making that's happening now that I haven't even talked much about quite yet. It's new. And it's this anti-Americanism that's popping up in some of the materials that I'm seeing out of the White House that I'll cover in subsequent episodes. In any event, when I saw the fact that the government is now saying that immigrants who put forward anti-American ideas and just speak in an anti-American way, it makes me wonder, what exactly are they talking about here? Are they talking about anything that we're saying now? Would this be one day considered anti-American? Would any criticism of the administration be considered anti-Americanism? And that really troubles me because there's that foresight that, hey, this is going to possibly impact a whole lot of people, citizens and non-citizens alike.
Yeah, I agree. And so when we talk about the slippery slope, how it starts with one group, people that we say, oh, they're not here legally, so they deserve it. But if you are restricting the speech of that group and you think their comments, whatever it's about, whether it's about immigration, whether it's about, what's happening in the Middle East. Well, if I say that and I'm an American citizen, like you said, am I being anti-American? Am I a threat? And you can easily see how that could happen, especially with some of the comments we've already heard from this administration saying they want to get rid of, the bad people. They want to send them to El Salvador. So why wouldn't it stop with just the immigrants? I'd see the immigrants as the beginning
Mm.
And I see it applying to everyone else, American citizens. That's the end game. And that's what we all need to be aware of. And, if we are not willing to stand up for the rights of immigrants today, who's going to stand up for the rights for us tomorrow?
Exactly. And President Trump has said it out of his mouth several times that he has no problems sending US citizens to El Salvador,
Mm-hmm.
right? You
Right.
might have heard him say those words as well.
Yeah.
This is such a great segue into the recent developments from the Trump administration to erode due process. And with respect to El Salvador, the Abrego Garcia case. How do you feel about what's happening with that?
Wow. So I'm so deeply disappointed and scared a little bit about what has happened to him because the administration has admitted they made a mistake. He should not have been sent to El Salvador. But then they say, we don't care. And then it goes further because the highest court in our country, the Supreme Court, has said you need to facilitate his return, and they are ignoring that order. So if they are ignoring the Supreme Court, then what happens next? They're ignoring this order, but you see how it becomes a pattern and they continue to ignore other lawful orders. And you start to have that erosion of due process, our constitutional rights, and there's no end to it. And so, the fact that it's Garcia today who's sitting in El Salvador, he didn't have a fair process, it just continues. So it's very concerning. And I really hope that people will be willing to speak out and to say something because we have elected officials, we have congressmen and senators who are just kind of sitting back and not saying anything or doing anything. And we've got to speak up. We've got to be willing to say something about what's happening.
Absolutely. And one of the ways that I've been describing what's happening with Abrego Garcia lately is the fact that this is a story about two men, President Donald Trump and Abrego Garcia. That's what this is about, the ego of the administration or the man Donald Trump with respect to not wanting to lose this fight.
Mhm.
That's how I see it. And with him not wanting to lose this fight, this administration will never, ever facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia, as they have said numerous times. And what's really sad about this is the fact that it really isn't so much about this man necessarily. I think what it is, it's the fear that, my God, this is the example of us losing or weakening our constitutional framework.
Right.
That's what he represents, the
Hmm.
weakening of the constitutional framework and testing whether it works or not. And so now that the Trump administration has come flat out and said, we're not going to do anything about this, he's back in his home country. He's back where he belongs. He has no right to be here. It's very hard for me to even predict what's going to happen down the road, other than the fact that maybe quietly after the Trump administration leaves office, that maybe his return will be facilitated somehow under another administration. But certainly, I don't see it happening under this one.
Right. And unfortunately, what they have done to Garcia in refusing to obey the orders from the Supreme Court, we already see it happening in how they're treating federal workers. They're refusing to obey lawful orders there also. Erosion is already happening. And you mentioned the students who have spoken out. I don't know a lot about immigration law, but I understand the student Mahmoud Khalil that he was here legally, that he had a green card. And so his green card has been revoked because of his speech. So I start to see things like that occur when we're talking, as we talked about earlier, what we say, it sends up all kinds of red flags because where does it end? What is the likely end to what we're seeing today? So it really creates a lot of fear. Are you seeing a lot of fear in your clients, especially clients who are here legally? They've done what people say, do the right thing and coming here. Are they afraid of what's happening right now?
Absolutely. They're terrified. Even those who have a lawful status. We have green card holder clients who are afraid to fly. They're afraid to go back to their parents' funeral. They're afraid to leave their house. They're terrified. And they call our office, and we have to assure them that you have nothing to worry about. You're in lawful status here in the United States. You really don't need us right now. Just relax a little. What you're seeing in the media are isolated incidences here and there. As immigration attorneys, we see these types of stories every day in our practice. But what's new is speech. Speech is the newest thing that this administration has thrown into the mix with immigration, because now you have the State Department through Marco Rubio exercising his authority under this foreign policy opportunity, so to speak, to go after people like Mahmoud Khalil and others based on their speech. Khalil is still fighting for his status, still fighting for his right to be here in the United States. And he has an uphill battle with that, with regard to his fight. But it's very alarming that people are so afraid, those who are here legally and those who are here, of course, illegally. Have you heard or seen the interview by Meet the Press with President Trump, in which he talked about the fact that he doesn't think that there should be hearings for millions of illegal aliens? He thought it was so absurd, right? Just the idea that they would be going to court before a judge. Did you see that?
Did see that, and I was shocked because he was saying, I don't believe we should apply the Constitution. I don't believe we should apply the laws of this country. It may be an inconvenience to allow people to have their day in court, but that's what we guarantee. That's what our Constitution, that's what our laws guarantee. So to hear the head of our country, the person at the very top who's directing everything, saying, I think it's a waste of time. It's too much. It would take too much time for us to give all these people a hearing. It was so shocking and surprising that those words came out of his mouth. And then it was shocking and concerning that there wasn't more of a reaction to what he said.
I think people are at the point where they expect the worst. They just expect the absolute worst. And, I think the shock and awe is gone. I mean, we've been shocked to the core, all right, over the last 3 months. And so I think people are just numb right now. I think they're feeling quite numb. But before we move on to maybe ending this on a higher note than the numbness that we're feeling, along those lines of illegal aliens or immigrants not having a right to go before a judge in court, is the whole debate now about suspending the writ of habeas corpus that
Right.
is on the table. Because if you suspend that, then it's just fast track deportations. We're just going to put them on a plane and send them home, or
Mhm.
buy the ticket for them and send them home.
Right. And where does this idea come from? When we had the Civil War, that's where, it was suspended, writ of habeas corpus was suspended. Are we in that type of situation today? This idea that we are under attack, this idea that, there's such a crisis that we have to suspend the rights of individuals to have access to the courts. I just don't see that type of urgency today to justify what they're suggesting. But I think we're seeing very rapidly the progression from, okay, we are not going to follow the rules, to we're just going to get rid of the rules. We're just going to suspend them altogether. And if the right to go to court is suspended for immigrants, you better believe that, we may be next, that we're in line for that to happen.
That's crazy, right? Just the idea that we're just going to ignore the laws that we don't like. That's really the philosophy now. Let's just ignore what we don't like. It's irrelevant because we've been invaded. It's an invasion. So I have to find a way to segue into maybe a cautionary high note, right? Like, I think the courts have been doing a tremendous job. The courts, from my standpoint, are the only ones, I think, in addition to the citizens, of course, citizens and the courts together, working together, can save our republic. What do you think? How do we get out of this mess?
Yeah, I think the courts have been doing a good job. They have been issuing the rulings that we need. The famous quote that I was referring to was by a president in regards to an order that had been issued from the Supreme Court. And he said, let the court enforce the order. So that's the limitation of the court. But it's really up to us to make sure these orders are enforced and the laws are enforced. We still have the right to vote. We still have the right every 2 years to elect a whole new Congress. So that is coming up soon. We still have the right as American citizens to speak up. And so we can show up at town halls. We can tell our congressmen, what our opinions are. And we really have to do that today. Because if we don't, they may think it's okay. They may take our silence to be, it's fine. We agree with what they're doing. So if you don't agree with what's happening, you've got to say something. I even see us being on TikTok and social media. That is a form of protest when we talk about these issues. And so I'm going to keep doing it. And I really encourage other people to keep doing it also.
Absolutely. It's a responsibility. What you're speaking of makes me think of the responsibility that we have as citizens. Whether you're a citizen actually or a non-citizen, it's a responsibility. And with that, I'm actually going to share a quote from the Heritage Foundation, the framers of Project 2025, who are behind the erosion of due process right out of their book. And this quote from the author, well, it was edited by Matthew Spalding of the Heritage Foundation at the time, says that in arguing for constitutional and institutional safeguards for liberty, James Madison never lost sight of the fact that the preservation of freedom ultimately depends on the citizens and their exercise of personal and political responsibility. Exactly what you've just shared, Danielle, about our responsibility to speak, our responsibility to vote, our responsibility to replace leaders who we don't think have our best interests in mind, our responsibilities to keep our eyes open, because if it could happen to our neighbor, it could happen to any one of us. And whether that neighbor has lawful status here or not is not even the issue. The issue is we are a country of laws. We believe in it. We're here because of those laws. You and I certainly wouldn't be here enjoying the liberties that we're enjoying today if folks didn't stand up many years ago and said, wait a minute, this isn't right. We don't like
Right.
how they are being treated. And so that's exactly what we're doing today. And so with that, Danielle, thank you so much for being my guest. I hope you'll come back to McBean Immigration TV, maybe on a better note. I don't know. Maybe we'll have something more positive
Yeah.
to discuss next time.
I hope so. I really enjoy talking to you. I really enjoy watching your videos and all the information that you provide. You've provided me with a lot of education about immigrant rights. So thank you for that. And yes, I'll come back anytime.
Perfect. Friends, thanks so much for joining us. And Danielle, tell us, where can folks find you? What are your handles on various social media platforms? And certainly we'll post it as well.
Well, thank you so much. So you can find me on almost every platform as I'm a lawyer in real life. So if you've seen me on TikTok, that's usually how I start my TikToks. I'm a lawyer in real life. I don't play one on television.
I
So
love that, by the way.
yeah. Well, thank you. So if you're looking for me on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, you can find me. I'm a lawyer in real life.
Perfect. And Danielle, what is the name of your law firm for those who might be in your area? They're in Georgia who have an issue, a civil litigation issue, and they're looking for a good lawyer.
You can find us in Georgia, South Atlanta Injury Lawyers. Give us a call. We handle cases throughout the state of Georgia. And also, we help people in other states who have civil litigation, personal injury matters. So give us a call. If we can't help you, we can certainly direct you to someone who can. So that's South Atlanta Injury Lawyers, and we can be reached at 470 WIN for you. That's WIN, the number 4YOU.
All right, excellent. Friends, thanks so much for being with us in this one. Comment below, let us know your thoughts, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.